Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is a six-time Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist with more than 20 years of experience covering immigration, border security, and corruption within the government. And the author of the book, Sand and Blood, none other than Mr. John Carlos Frey. Welcome, Mr. John, on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yes, my name is John Carlos Frey. I'm a native born to Tijuana, Mexico. Grew up in Southern California, very close to the U.S.-Mexico border. As a matter of fact, my family home, you could see the U.S.-Mexico border fence from where I grew up. Migrants crossing the border, border patrol activity, helicopters, migrants on the run. This was part of my daily upbringing. I would see migrants. If it were raining, they would be asleep under cars. Some I got to know personally. This whole issue of migration, cat and mouse, capturing them, detaining them, deporting them, has been a part of my life ever since I was a young boy. So it was kind of natural for me to go in this direction as a journalist. I've covered the U.S.-Mexico border, border security, federal police forces for about 20 years now. And as you mentioned, thank you, the book Sand and Blood is a chronicle of that history.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. John. Thank you. As you said, you're born in Tijuana and raised in San Diego. Moving between two worlds your entire life, you have also written about how you once tried to pass as an American and hide your Mexican heritage. How did the internal conflict, that desire to leave one part of yourself behind, shape your journalist you eventually become?
As a young boy, it was not cool. It was not a great thing to be Mexican. I could see that other Mexican kids were being treated poorly, were being discriminated against. Those kids that were darker skinned than me, that had Hispanic last names like Rodriguez or Hernandez. My last name is Frey, F-R-E-Y, because my father is Swiss. My father is European. So as a young boy, I tried very hard to pass as being white. I went by the first name John and only the last name Frey. I did not use my middle name, which is Carlos, so that nobody could identify me as being Latino, and I tried to pass. As I grew up and matured, and as an adult, I knew that I was doing myself a disservice to renounce my heritage. It was only because I didn't want to be ridiculed or I didn't want to be discriminated against that I tried to pass as white. But as an adult, obviously, I have retraced my roots. I have embraced them. I am proud of who I am. I have dedicated my life to telling these kinds of stories at the border and the stories of Latinos. So I have come full circle.
You spent 10 years as a Hollywood actor, appearing on the shows like The Practice, Days of Our Lives, and even Freaky Friday. That's a long way from investigative journalists on the border. What pulled you out of that world into the desert and detention centers and unmarked graves?
Great question. I was a very dedicated actor for a long, probably half of my career, and then got disenfranchised, disillusioned by the world of beer commercials and television shows, and wanted to do something that was a little bit more meaningful. I made a documentary about migrants crossing the border. It was my first foray into making a documentary, and I loved it. It was not a hard decision to leave the acting world behind and to jump into making documentary films, which then was an entree into journalism. So the transition was very smooth and very easy. I don't miss the world of Hollywood and acting. I'm fully dedicated to being a journalist and have been for about 20 years now.
Your book's subtitle calls the stealth of war or stealth war. The word war is described and provocative. You are arguing that what's happening on the border is not just a policy disagreement or enforcement, is the actual war. Walk us through the framing. Who is the enemy and who are the casualties?
Since 9/11, we have much more of a war footing on the U.S.-Mexico border. We have Black Hawk helicopters, which are vehicles of war. We have stealth technology. We have sensors. We have drones. We have an increased force in the U.S. Border Patrol, ICE agents, customs agents. They are all armed with Humvees. The thing that we're probably missing are tanks. But this whole infrastructure of border security since 9/11 has much more of a war footing. There are war contractors, Raytheon, Lockheed, the same companies that make vehicles of war work down on the U.S.-Mexico border. We have prisoners in the form of detainees. We have tens of thousands of people who are being held against their will. So it feels very much like a cat and mouse war game. The people who are the enemy, if we put that in quotation marks, are the migrants who are trying to gain entry into the United States.
Very well said, Mr. John. You write that after 9/11, while America's attention was on Iraq and Afghanistan, the war on terror was quietly ramped on our soil, aimed not to terrorists but economic migrants, refugees, and families. How did you first uncover that disconnect? What is the specific document, a source, or a moment in the desert where you realized the scale of what is being hidden?
I actually crossed the U.S.-Mexico border illegally with a migrant group in 2007. This is just a little while after 9/11 had really gotten a strong foothold on the U.S.-Mexico border. And the people that I met that were crossing, that were trying to get into the United States, were economic migrants. These were not terrorists. There was nobody that I met, and the hundreds of people that I met, that wanted to do the United States any harm. They were not carrying any weapons. They did not have an ideology to try and harm the United States. They were going to go work at Walmart or McDonald's or work on a farm. So the people that I met, that I crossed the border with, were people who were poor and hungry for the most part. Yet on the U.S. side, we had this military might trying to stop them all. Instead of providing a pathway for jobs, we were deterring them with building border fences and using ammunitions to keep them at bay. So this escalation of a militarized zone was happening against people who didn't have a choice. They didn't have a way to make a living in their home country, and they were coming to send money back home.
Interesting, Mr. John. You name defense contractors and lobbyists seeking profits, and politicians from both parties relying on racist fear magnering or managering, as I said, as the engine driving this war. How did you trace the money and the boats back to the death in the desert? What is the investigations reveal about who benefits when borders become battlefields?
Yes, the beneficiaries for the most part are these defense contractors. When I first started reporting along the U.S.-Mexico border, the Border Patrol budget was under $2 billion. It might sound like a lot of money, $2 billion. But since then, 20 years ago, since then, the budget is now $175 billion, and that is for ICE and for Border Patrol and for border fences and for detention facilities. And the people who are benefiting for the most part are the defense contractors and the people who supply a very large border force. The largest police force in the United States is the U.S. Border Patrol and ICE, numbering over 75,000 individuals. They need to all be equipped with armaments, with gear, with tactical gear, with vehicles, with uniforms, and all of this is supplied by the same suppliers who supply our U.S. Army. So there is a very large trough that defense contractors feed at, and those budgets have never gone down. As long as I've been reporting along the border, those budgets almost annually go up every year. They have ballooned under Trump massively. I think now he's spending close to $40 billion to build more border walls, $75 billion for ICE, another $30+ billion to increase the size of the Border Patrol and to increase infrastructure. So the people manufacturing the weapons, the uniforms, the detention facilities are all benefiting.
Your book takes readers to a broader patrol outpost, unmarked graves, detention centers, and halls of power. Of all the places you went, all the scenes you witnessed, What's the single most haunting image or moment that still stays with you when you close your eyes?
It would have to be the treatment of migrants, the way that the U.S. treats those that are economically disadvantaged, the people for the most part who are fleeing unrest, maybe even persecution, fleeing war zones, fleeing famine, fleeing the effects of climate change, for the most part, are not, in my opinion, criminally intended. They are fleeing a place where they can no longer stay. And we treat them as criminal. We treat them as invaders. We treat them as rapists, as murderers. And for the most part, these people are stuck between a place that they can no longer live and a place that they need to go to try and make a living. So our compassion seems to be almost zero when it comes to what's happening south of our border. Their stories, why they've left their homelands, why they've left their families, why they've tried to get to the United States, their stories are the things that haunt me regularly.
You've won 6 Emmy Awards, a George Polk Award, an IRE Medal, and the Edward R. Murrow Award for your investigative work. Those are the highest honors in journalism. When you were out in the desert, finding remains, talking to families, and watching policy become body count, did awards ever feel inadequate or even absurd in the face of what you are documenting?
Yes, very much so. Thank you for that question. I think that the awards are shallow. I think the awards obviously are recognized by my peers. I am honored by the prestigious awards, but they don't solve the problem. They don't solve the issues that I was reporting on. They don't do much to move the needle to try and resolve the disparity between the two countries. I'm talking about Mexico and the United States. I remember winning an Emmy for reporting on child labor in Mexico, children having to toil in fields. And I won an Emmy, and those children are still working in those fields. That Emmy didn't do anything to solve that problem. So sometimes the awards can feel hollow.
Very well said, Mr. John. The book includes chapter titled "The War Begins Again." The military arrives at the border, death, and deterrent. And the soldiers walk us through that escalation. How do you go from imagination enforcement to militarized zone where death is accepted as a tool of policy?
It is a fallacy to believe that we need war armaments, a militarized zone. I have never seen a terrorist come up from Mexico. I grew up along the U.S. Mexico border before there was a fence, before there were a lot of U.S. Border Patrol officers. I'm not suggesting at all that we open the borders and that we don't have a form of a securitized zone, but this constant drone to build more fencing, to increase the size of the U.S. Border Patrol, to bring in more armaments of war, to me seems like a waste of money and a waste of time. For the most part, what we're dealing with are economic migrants. There are those too who are also fleeing civil unrest in their home countries, but these are not terrorists. These are not invaders. These are not people who have criminal intent for the most part. Even the U.S. Border Patrol's own statistics, these are not mine, say 99% of the people who are trying to gain access to the United States are coming for a job. So those aren't my statistics, those are theirs. So this idea of using soldiers to keep people from coming into the United States to find a job seems a little bit like overkill to me.
You write the thousands of migrants have died in detention or crossing the border. Those are statistics, but you've met the families. You've seen the graves. When you sit across from a mother who lost her children crossing, or father whose son died in custody, what do you ask you? What do you want Americans to understand?
I think we've lost our humanity in some places when it comes to the immigration debate. I understand the debate. I understand the need for border security, for a country's own sovereignty. But when we do it with a sense of callousness that these are human beings, that these are our neighbors, I have compassion for the people who lose their loved ones. I have journeyed with them. I have ridden in the back of semi-trucks with them. I have crossed the deserts with them. I have come to know them as people. I know them by name. And so when they lose their loved ones to the desert or in a detention facility, I grieve. I grieve for them. And I think those are the pieces that we seem to be missing in our policies. Our policies are cold and callous. I know the Trump administration now is trying to detain up to 100,000 people in detention facilities. They are looking to build warehouses and house tens of thousands of people, almost like kennels. So I think that we need to step back a bit and maybe think about our humanity and our kinship and our brotherhood. Those might temper some of our policies.
You need an applause for that, Mr. John. Very well said and beautifully articulated. You include the chapter specifically on Trump, but your timeline goes back decades. How do the Trump era policies fit into a longer arc you are tracing? Is it the aberration or a logical confusion of war that has been building for 30 years?
We have not resolved this issue of immigration. We may want to blame it all on Trump or point our fingers at Trump for the ICE raids or the detention policies, but he is standing on shoulders of administrations before him. Ronald Reagan was the last president who even provided any sort of relief for migrants who were in the United States with an amnesty program. He allowed them a pathway to citizenship. It was 40, almost 50 years ago. We have not touched this issue of immigration. Our immigration system is broken. It's very hard for immigrants to get to the United States, to find the right documents to work in the United States legally. We hire them illegally. We're happy to bring them into the United States and let them work in our construction sites and our fields and our restaurants, but not give them a vote, not give them a proper form of documentation, not allow them to come and migrate legally. So this system has been broken for a long time. Obama was the deporter in chief. The Bush administration did similarly, building along the border. Clinton was the same avaricious deporter as well and wall builder. So presidents before Trump, administrations before Trump, have helped to break the system. It has been broken for a long time, and Trump, for the most part, is just standing on the laws that came before him. He's not enacting any new laws. The way that we're seeing him manage the border and him deport people and him detain people are, for the most part, legal avenues that he has at his disposal because of administrations and Congresses before him.
Mr. Gunn, you've testified, you have worked, studied in university, you've sparked congressional hearings. When you sit on those hearings and watch politicians who've enabled these wars speak about compassion and security, what goes through your mind? How do you stay composed?
It's a good question, and it is angering and it is deflating. I don't really believe in politicians doing the right thing. Politicians, for the most part, will use the immigration debate as a political ploy and use migrants as a scapegoat to gain votes. They will scare people into voting for them. I have seen politicians use this issue in an inhumane way. I think most progress has been made by people themselves, immigrant advocacy groups, migrants themselves. Politicians, for the most part, are ignorant and they don't know how to talk about this issue and they don't understand the complexities of migration. You have one of the wealthiest nations in the world, next to one of the poorer countries in the world. Mexico, Central America, South America are desperate for jobs, are desperate for economic equality. We don't fix those problems. We point the finger at the poor people as the cause of those problems instead of elevating economic standards. So I think you're going to have to be a deep thinker if you're a good politician about this issue, and I don't find that to be the case. I think certainly the Trump administration has been grandstanding on the backs of migrants for a long time.
Again, very well said, Mr. John. Truly empowering answer. Your documentaries include Invisible Mexicans of Deer Canyon, the 800-mile wall on border, one body, and life and death on the border. Your book continues that work of making the invisible visible. Who is the person you most want America to see? The one whose story is it truly understood or would change everything?
I don't know if one individual story would change everything, but the people that I have met are the people that work in the back rooms of your restaurant, the dishwasher, the busboy, who maybe doesn't even speak English, who may have brown skin and may seem shy when he approaches your table. I've crossed the border with these people. I've gotten their stories. There was one individual who I crossed into the Arizona desert with. He was a 17-year-old boy. He had a job. He was coming from Mexico, and someone had given him a job in a restaurant in California. And he was going to cross that desert and he was going to cross that border illegally so that he could get to that job, he could get to that restaurant and send money back home to his mother who had cancer. He was doing the noble thing. He was doing the thing that was most definitely what any of us would do if our mother was dying of cancer. We would seek any avenue to make sure that she got the right medical care. I was proud to cross with that individual, and he was only 17, and he was willing to risk his life so that his mother would get the life-saving medication that she needed. So these are the kinds of stories that I try to tell, and these are the kinds of stories that have changed my life.
And we salute you for that, Mr. John. We support you 100%. You're currently developing documentary projects on disappearance and death of more than 100 women in the southwestern United States. How does that work connect to the border story? What are we missing about gender violence in this stealth war?
Yes, gender violence for sure, but even the fact that there is a border, that there are two countries, that there is this war zone seems to be missing from U.S. press reports. We'll certainly talk about the immigration raids, which is necessary, but there is a whole other struggle that's going on along the border. There's been over 100 women who have lost their lives in the deserts of the American Southwest, near New Mexico and El Paso, Texas. These women's bodies have been discovered in the deserts. There have been no forensics. There have been no investigations. We do not know them by name. We do not know why they died. We do not know why they continue to die. I'm assuming if 100 women's bodies were found in Central Park in New York, there would be an investigation on each one. So I'm focusing on these stories because I think they are the same value and the same importance, and hopefully we'll get some answers soon.
Yes, hopefully, for sure, Mr. John. You also investigated the murder cover up by federal agents for an upcoming HBO documentary. When the people sworn to protect become the people who kill and conceal, what does that to do a community's trust? And what does a journalist's faith institutions?
Well, there is a documentary that just came out in December on HBO called Critical Incident. It is one of my investigations into the U.S. Border Patrol's system of cover up. If somebody dies at the border, if a Border Patrol agent fires his weapon, and it's very similar to what happened to Alex Peretti and to Renee Good, there's rarely an investigation into the shooting. Why did he use his weapon? Why did he fire his weapon? Why did he kill someone? Was his life being threatened? These kinds of questions are usually investigated by any other form of law enforcement. City police always are investigated when they fire their weapons, but in the U.S. Border Patrol, they have fired their weapons hundreds of times. They have killed over 200 people along the border and in the interior, as we've seen in Minneapolis, and the investigations go by the wayside. We don't know why. They are rarely prosecuted, if ever, and they've never been convicted of any wrongdoing. So the documentary on HBO, Critical Incident, is an investigation into that system of cover-up and basically exonerating the Border Patrol agents every time they fire their weapons.
Interesting, Mr. John. You're fully bilingual and binational, born in Mexico and working in American media. You've been published in English in Los Angeles Times and Huffington Post, and in Spanish El Diario. How does moving between languages and audiences change the way you tell these stories? Do you find Americans and Mexicans hear the same facts differently?
Yes, I don't believe that English language media understands the Spanish language at all. They don't cover it very well at all. Most people, especially in my documentaries, don't want to watch subtitles. So there's a disconnect, there's a separation, there's a language barrier. So understanding both languages and speaking both languages fluently allows me to understand the culture. A lot gets lost in translation, so it allows me to move fluidly between the United States and countries where Spanish is being spoken. I feel like I belong in both areas equally. I can speak to people in their native tongues and understand them in a way that translation seems to miss. So it's what I call my superpower, the fact that I can speak both languages and move between the borders on both sides.
You've worked with nearly every major network: 60 Minutes, PBS, NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, Univision, Telemundo, Netflix, HBO. When you pitch these stories, is there a difference in how outlets receive them? Do some shy away from the word war?
Yes, they shy away from the word war. The networks, for the most part, don't want to ruffle the feathers of the administration. They want to tread lightly on the issue of immigration. They don't necessarily want to look favorably on people who come into the country illegally. It's very difficult to place a story about migration in a favorable light with the US networks. I can do that in Spanish and the Spanish language networks without a problem. Telemundo, Univision, TVS Teca, some of the other Spanish language outlets will always tell stories of migrants, but that doesn't translate into English. Most of the English language media outlets want to tell the story of the crime, of the invader, of the terrorist, these outlandish stories that we think of when we think of undocumented immigrants. So it's very hard to place favorable stories, but that's my dedication. That's what I've tried to do my entire career.
And again, thank you for your legacy, Mr. John.
Thank you.
Hoping for the best. Your work is now studied in university and high schools. What do you hope the next generation of journalists learn from your investigations, not just about technique, but about moral clarity?
I think the best thing for any investigative journalist such as myself is to be relentless and to go to where the story is. We are fed so much media today in our phones and our screens, our tablets, our television sets. And for a journalist to only skim the surface of what's happening, I think is doing a disservice to the public. Go to the places and speak to the people that you meet there and spend time that's valuable. Investigative journalism is a dying art. A lot of outlets today have let go of their investigative journalists. So I've spoken to some who still want to do this kind of work and to dig deep. And I encourage that the information that you come with, that you come away with, is invaluable to the public. My work is not for myself. It's not for the awards. It's for those that read and watch what I do.
Certainly. And to wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. John, your book ends with a warning that we are no safer despite of all this militarization, all this death, all this suffering. If you could speak directly to a young person, maybe someone like you once was, trying to hide their heritage or trying to pass, who is watching the border debate from afar and feeling hopeless, what would you want them to hear? Not about policy, but about their
Of
own
course,
power to witness, to document, and to refuse to look away.
I agree with everything that you've just said and would like to amplify it by saying that there's no reason to be ashamed of where you come from, even if the US government, for the most part, portrays you in a negative stereotypic light. You have power and authority over your own destiny, and I would encourage you to move in that direction for sure. Thank you.
Very well said, Mr. John. So, can you please invite our listeners to support Sand and Blood or anything you want to promote on Book 101 Review?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the plug on the book. Please pick up Sand and Blood anywhere where you get your books or on Amazon. It's available everywhere, and it's a chronicle of the U.S.-Mexico border and gives you a deep background of where we are today and why we are where we are today.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. John Carlos Frey, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering legacy will rise. So, Mr. John, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Modicum people, see you soon.
They can see the HBO documentary